Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and today we're taking a second look at the Aruba Instant On suite of products. Now, I did a full video on Aruba Instant On some time back. I'll put a link on the screen to that video where I did a deep dive into the Aruba Instant On interface. In this video, we're not going to necessarily do as deep a dive into their interface, but we are going to talk about some of the new improvements with Aruba Instant On version 2.3, and we also did full benchmark testing across all of these access points, including this one right here, which is their new 2x2 Wi-Fi 6 AP22 model. So let's take a look at the products that I have here in front of me. First of all, we have one of their switches. Now, in the Aruba Instant On family of products, they only have access points and switches, right? They kind of keep everything super simple. There's no firewalls, there's no, NVRs or LTE devices or any other nonsense, right? There's just access points and switches. This switch right here is the 1930 model. This is $349 on Amazon, and it has 24 gigabit PoE ports with 195 watt total PoE budget. Those are 802.3 AF/AT PoE ports. And then over here on the side, we have 4 10 gig SFP plus ports. For the access points, I've got 3 different models here. I have the AP12. AP12 is a 3x3 multi-user MIMO Wi-Fi 5 access point, so 802.3 AC Wave 2. The MSRP, or I should say on Amazon, this AP12 is $141.36. Next, we move up to the AP15. The AP15 is $192.50 on Amazon, but this AP15 is also Wi-Fi 5, 802.3 AC Wave 2, but it is a 4x4 multi-user MIMO access point as opposed to the AP12, which is 3x3. Then we have the new one. So this is the brand new unit that I received from Aruba. This is the AP22. It is a 2x2 multi-user MIMO 802.3 AX, meaning Wi-Fi 6 access point. And the AP22 is $159.99 on Amazon. So now let's take a look at the Aruba Instant On portal to see what's new with version 2.3, and then we're going to dig into the benchmarks and see how these access points performed and how they stack up next to other access points that I've tested. Aruba just released version 2.3 of the Aruba Instant On portal interface, and it comes with a number of significant improvements, including my favorite improvement, which is that they added two-factor authentication. Now, this is an interesting thing. I was thinking about Aruba Instant On and their two-factor authentication, and of course, it's always a good idea to have or at least offer two-factor authentication for any online cloud-based portal. But unlike some of the other cloud, SDN type solutions that I've reviewed, such as TP-Link's Omada, as well as the Unify suite of products, Aruba Instant On only makes access points and switches, right? So thinking through their interface, there would be no ability for someone who compromised the Aruba Instant On portal. So if you didn't have two-factor, maybe you had a weak password or something like that, and your Aruba Instant On portal was compromised, they could definitely mess up your network. They could screw it up royally, but they wouldn't really be able to, as far as I can tell, open up any ports so that they could gain access to your network. They would have to know where you are physically and then maybe change an access point or an SSID's password so that they can now gain access to your network. Or in other words, if someone is remote to your network, they don't know where your network is, and they somehow gained access to your Aruba Instant On portal, that doesn't necessarily, it's not as catastrophic a breach as with some of the other solutions that I mentioned previously. That being said, of course, always turn on two-factor authentication wherever you can and get to know it, get to love it, get to use it absolutely everywhere. But as I said, it's not quite as severe a consequence with Aruba as it would be with some other products. So number one thing they added in version 2.3, two-factor authentication. They have also now added Mac-based authentication for your clients. They've done some improved things, like they reduced the access point boot up time. If you look here, this is how they used to do it. The AP would boot up, then it would do a firmware upgrade, and then it would basically be online, which took a significant amount of time the first time around, or if it needs a firmware update, because it forces that firmware update before you have any visibility into the access point. Now they've sort of switched that around so that the firmware upgrade is done through the Aruba Instant On portal, as in you have to trigger it as opposed to it happening automatically when you plug the access point in. I think they were having some issues with people saying, oh, this thing takes so long to boot up or something, so they kind of rearranged how that works. You now also have full control over the transmit power and radio management for these devices. So previously, everything was set to auto, right? Auto channel width selection, auto channel selection, auto power output, right? So everything was automatic. Now you have a little bit more control over that. Not the most control that I've seen, but definitely more than they had previously. And when I was speaking to my contact at Aruba, he was telling me that, look, in most cases, their automatic settings are going to be better than what anyone would be able to set manually, but that they built this feature in because so many people had requested it. A lot of people like that manual control over their access points. So we'll take a look at that as well. They also made some improvements to the 802.11k sticky client stuff, but of course keep in mind that which access point a phone, for instance, is connected to has to do with the phone, right? It has less to do with the access point and more to do with the phone. So for devices that are 802.11k compliant, there's some new features built in to help with that. So then they have some other usability improvements, option to lock admin account, network assignment improvements, STP visibility, DHCP reservations, excuse me, ping and trace route, and switch port mirroring. So all good stuff. And the thing about Aruba is that the interface and the setup of these devices is very, very simple, right? The devices are incredibly easy to set up, and there's not a million options in the interface. You know, it has all of the options in the interface that, 90+% of networks are going to need. And that's one of the things that I actually like about this solution, is that if I were an MSP and I were managing people's networks, the simplicity of the Aruba Instant On solution, it would be really attractive to me, right? Because it means less training for my IT guys. It means that everything can be more cookie cutter. The more options you have, the more options you can potentially use to screw up someone's network, right? So I like that it is sort of streamlined down to just the options that most people are going to want and need. So we'll take a quick brush through here. Here are my networks. And the way that I've set this system up is that I have my sort of three standard VLANs. I have my main LAN, which is going to be at 192.168.1.x. Then I have a guest network LAN, or a guest wireless network, that is secluded from the other networks, as in anyone on the guest network can't get to the main LAN, they can't get to the IoT network. Then we also have the IoT network, which again is also secluded from the other networks. So kind of just a standard, like what I would consider to be a standard home setup, right? Main LAN, guest LAN, IoT LAN, right? Or VLAN. So those things all work together. Now you say, well, Chris, what are you doing for a firewall, considering that Aruba doesn't have a firewall offering for their Instant On interface? Well, for the firewall, I'm using a Netgate SG1100 pfSense box. So great little router. I show it to you, but it's down here, and I don't have a cable that's long enough, but I'll try to get some B-roll of it. That SG1100 works perfectly with the Aruba Instant On stuff. All the VLANs work. The VLANs work between the pfSense as well as the Aruba switch. There's been no problems. I was able to set everything up just like you would expect. So let's take a look, for example, at our Aruba Jamaica site. This is my main site, so just like TP-Link Omada, just like Unify, you can have multiple sites so that if you were managing multiple clients, each client would be their own site. This is the management VLAN by default, and we have not restricted any sort of access to the network on this main LAN. And then we have network assignment, which basically allows us to see all of our switches in the network, and we can assign this particular network as a tagged or untagged network on any of the switch ports that Aruba is managing. Now, connected to that, we have our SSID. So you can see we have our network, which is the site. Then we have the SSID, which pertains to that network. So here we can see the SSID. We can see our password is where we would input down here. You can also choose Radius Server Authentication. And they do have an option. So again, they keep things super simple. Like you don't have a drop down with like 6 different types of network passwords. You know, you've got password-based authentication or radius-based authentication. And then within password-based authentication, you can be WPA2 personal, or if you check this box, you're WPA2 and WPA3. Now, I don't have that box checked. The reason that I don't have that box checked is that in my testing, the WPA3 stuff did not work very well with some of my clients. So I've got 2 clients that I do the benchmark testing with that are Linux, you know, Ubuntu 20.04 boxes with a Wi-Fi 6 network card, wireless card inside those boxes. And when I had WPA3 enabled and I was running iPerf tests, those 2 boxes in particular were getting crazy amounts of retries. But also on Engenius. So I was also testing an Engenius Wi-Fi 6 access point with WPA3 enabled, and I got a ton of retries on the Engenius one too. So I think it just has something to do with Ubuntu or the card that I'm using, or perhaps the drivers for that card within Ubuntu. I'm not really sure. I didn't clear it up. But disabling WPA3 and going with WPA2 only provided much cleaner and consistent test results in the benchmarks than having WPA3 enabled. And again, that wasn't just for Aruba, that was also for the Engenius access points that I tested as well. If we click here under options, we can see all of the various options. And again, I'm not going to do a total deep dive into the Aruba Instant On interface. I did that in my previous video, which I will have linked down below in the description. When you create a VLAN here, so you create a VLAN, for instance, I created my IoT VLAN 107. Very simple to assign that to a wireless network. So here's my Aruba ID IoT network, and you can see that I have selected VLAN 107 for this particular wireless SSID. Okay, this next block here is for all of our client statistics. I just fired this network up. I don't have any clients connected to it. The third block over here shows us some statistics about how much bandwidth is being used, as well as applications. And then we have our devices. So devices, we can see that I have 4 devices online. Here's our switch. Now, in the previous Aruba Instant On video that I did not have one of their switches. So I'll show you a little bit of the switch configuration, but it is pretty basic. So you've got your device name. You can choose whether your switch is DHCP or if you give it a static IP address. And they also have this allow routing between networks, which is kind of an interesting checkbox to me, considering that it's a layer 2 switch. It's not a layer 3 switch. So I'm not exactly sure what this does, but in all of my testing, I just left that off. And then we can go to our ports. So you can see per each port, what is the main untagged network and what tagged VLANs are also riding on that same port. And here is the new Mac-based authentication. So you've got port-based authentication or client-based authentication. And then you can also tie everything to a power schedule. And when you set up a power schedule, it says the power will be delivered to participating ports only during the following days and hours of the week. So we can say, for instance, if we wanted to turn off all of our voice over IP phones on the weekends, we can just select Monday through Friday all day, or we can say active between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. That way outside of those hours, we're disabling power to the ports that our VoIP phones are plugged into, so that we're sort of saving that power. And then by the time people show up on Monday, those devices are back online. Then if we click on networks, it's a little bit redundant, but we can see all of the untagged and tagged ports. So for instance, my main network is untagged across almost all of the ports except for this one that I was playing with over here. And then we have, VLAN 10 is tagged across all the ports, and VLAN 107 IoT network is tagged across all the ports except for port 2, where it is the untagged, it's an untagged port for that network. And then you have some tools where you can set up the port mirroring. For the access points themselves, super simple. We can see here's AP22. We can see what version it's on. We can see which switch it's plugged into. And same thing, you can set it if you want DHCP or assign a static IP address to your access point. You can see some port statistics, and then you can manage your radios. So this is really interesting. This is one of the newer things that they added, being able to check this box to say, use specific configurations for this radio. Now, when we do that, here's the 5 gigahertz radio on this Wi-Fi 6 access point. You can choose if it's 20 or 40 megahertz channel width, or you can choose if it's 20, 40, 80 megahertz channel width. Now, you're not able to select specifically 80 megahertz, which was really interesting. And when I had it set on 20, 40, 80, where it would sort of auto-select the channel width, I never saw this access point go to 80, right? So I was running site surveys, and I could see how much channel or how much bandwidth this access point was consuming, and it was always 40 megahertz. So a lot of the other access points in my testing, I was able to manually set them to 80 megahertz and therefore take more bandwidth out of the spectrum, whereas this one at 20, 40, 80 kind of auto selection always stuck to 40. So in my opinion, we'll look at the benchmark testing, but I think this radio could have performed better if I was able to manually set it to 80 megahertz instead of this sort of like auto setting that they have here. Now for channel selection, same thing. You can basically choose which channels are allowed, which channels this access point is allowed to be on. Now I just had the channels in the upper end of the spectrum here because my own personal wireless access points are in the lower end of the spectrum, and in my benchmark testing, I make sure that there's as little overlap as possible. And then you now also have the option to set the transmit power anywhere from low all the way up to maximum. So as they said with this version 2.3 update, they did give folks the ability to manually set some of the settings for the radios, but it's not full control over the settings, as you can see. Okay, so now let's take a look at how these devices performed in my benchmark testing, and they actually performed pretty well. So here is my iPerf testing. Anything in orange here are the Aruba access points. So you can see that the 2x2 Wi-Fi 6 access point came in second place in all of my benchmark testing, including it beat out the 2x2 Wi-Fi 6 U6 Lite from Ubiquiti. For the iPerf testing anyways. Now, the other two access points, the AP12, came in second place out of the Aruba access points, followed by the AP15, which is actually pretty interesting to me because the AP12 is 3x3, the AP15 is 4x4. Now, the clients that I'm testing with are just standard desktop clients, so I believe they're all 2x2. So unless I was doing testing with multiple clients hitting the access point simultaneously, I probably wouldn't see any benefit from testing a 3x3 access point versus a 4x4 access point. But the AP12 outperformed the AP15 in almost every single test, as we will see. So next we have my open speed test testing. Now in this test, this is basically where I run multiple open speed tests for all of these access points on the LAN, right? So we're just going at LAN speed. The internet is not involved here. And we can see that in the open speed testing, the 3x3 Wi-Fi 5 access point from Aruba came in first place out of the Aruba access points. So we have the U6LR still at the top of the list, followed by the U6 Lite from Ubiquiti. Third place was now the Aruba AP12, followed by the Aruba AP22, the Wi-Fi 6 2x2 access point. Then again, dropping down third place out of the Aruba access points that I tested is once again the AP15, the 4x4, which is interesting to me. I mean, look at the difference. The 3x3 killed it compared to that 4x4 in this testing. Now let's look at our sustained throughput testing. This is basically where I have multiple clients connecting and downloading one large file from my 10 gig connected NAS. And yeah, you can see the results here. So the Nano HD is still the king of the sustained throughput test, followed by the U6LR. Then we have Engenius and a TP-Link, and then we get into our Aruba access points, where once again, the AP12 beat out the Wi-Fi 6 AP22 by just a little bit here in the sustained throughput testing, and both of those access points creamed the AP15, which again is now second to bottom in sustained throughput out of all of the access points that I've tested. So now if we take averages of all of these different tests and we put it into our Crosstalk benchmark score, where do these access points line up? You can see right here. So it's all of the yellow ones. Basically, all of the Aruba access points are in the top half of my benchmark testing, which is actually pretty impressive. So U6LR, of course, is still top of the list, followed by the Engenius EWS 850. That's that outdoor access point. And then look at this. Our new third place contender, our new third place access point on the Crosstalk access point benchmark score is now the AP12. It's that 3x3 multi-user MIMO Wi-Fi 5 access point. Great little access point. I mean, look at that. Third place now, just behind the U6LR and the Engenius, and it just barely beat out the U6 Lite. So look at the total average metrics, 338 megabits per second for the AP12, 336 for the U6 Lite, and then we have 335 for the AP22. So basically, the AP12, AP22, and Ubiquiti U6 Lite are almost basically identical in terms of the benchmark scores that they received. Then we have the Nano HD, and then finally, for the Aruba access points that I tested, we have the AP15, which had an overall average of 278 megabits in all of my testing. So really, really cool, right? That's kind of surprised me that the AP12 was the top of the heap out of the three Aruba access points that I tested. So really impressive little access point, but let's check out the bang for your buck, right? Based on these test results and based on the price of the access point, where's your money best spent? And for bang for your buck, it meant the lower the score, the better. You still cannot beat, so not dethroned yet, you cannot beat the U6 Lite, the Ubiquiti U6 Lite in terms of price to performance, but that little AP12 is now second place price to performance. I mean, look at this. That's just absolutely awesome. So we kind of go back and forth between Ubiquiti access points and Aruba access points. We have the one TP-Link access point in here, and then at the bottom of the list, we have all of the Engenius access points that I've tested that just, their performance isn't spectacular and the price is so high that all three of them are just at the bottom of this list in terms of price to performance. Okay, so final thoughts on these Aruba access points and the benchmark testing. Number one, I'm really, really surprised at that AP12. It performed so well in these tests compared to even the other Aruba access points that it's just a really good value, that access point. And keep in mind that there's no real reason to necessarily jump to Wi-Fi 6 unless you've got a really dense client environment. So for a standard office environment, that AP12 is actually a really good value and provides excellent performance, and it has a really decent price as well. But in general, all of the Aruba access points performed very well in my testing. Again, all three of them are in the top 50% of all access points that I've tested. And so yeah, I'm pretty impressed with how they stacked up in the benchmarks. As far as the Aruba Instant On portal, it is very simplified. And again, that could be a plus or a minus, depending on what you're looking for, right? If I'm an MSP and I'm looking to roll out a solution for a lot of my clients, this is definitely a contender because I can pop in a pfSense firewall and then I can just manage their access points and their switches remotely with the Aruba Instant On portal. And the settings are really straightforward and simple. I mean, it's a really simple solution. It's nice and clean interface, and it performs well, right? So you can, I guess, think of that as a pro or a con, depending on if you like the simplicity and the aesthetics of the interface versus something like TP-Link Omada or Unify that just gives you an overwhelming amount of options. The setup of these access points is also super simple. You plug them in, they show up in the portal, or you can scan the barcode and just add them manually. Both ways work perfectly fine. I tested them both. One downside to these devices is I don't believe that they have a local interface, right? So for folks that want to have a local interface where, like, you know, TP-Link, you know, they have their Omada cloud stuff, but you also have the option of just getting their, you know, their cloud key. I think it's called a Sky key. Maybe that's Engenius. I don't know. I'm getting so mixed up with all of these different solutions. No, Engenius is the Sky key. TP-Link has something else. It's that little hardware box, but it's basically like the Ubiquiti cloud key. That is for local administration of your SDN, right? Your software-defined network. There is no such local administration for Aruba. Everything is cloud-based, but they do have two-factor authentication now, which is a huge bonus. I would not have recommended them without two-factor authentication. Now that they have two-factor authentication, I think it's definitely a viable solution if you're okay with cloud management of your network devices. And in order to use their cloud, there's no licensing fees, there's no subscription fees, anything like that. You basically, once you buy the access point, you have access to the cloud for the life of the product. So there you have it, a look at the Aruba Instant On access points, including the brand new Wi-Fi 6 AP22, as well as that cool 24-port switch. You know, I will mention one more thing about the 24-port switch. I might seem like I'm yelling right here into the microphone, and you probably can't hear it on the microphone, but the switch is actually pretty loud, okay? If you put it into a rack, you know, in a server room, maybe you wouldn't notice that the fan noise is pretty loud, but it's a pretty loud switch. And so I would, you know, pop the case and maybe look at replacing the fans with, you know, some sort of better, you know, Noctua fans or something that aren't going to be quite as loud, if that's something that's important to you. All right, so what do you guys think about Aruba Instant On? Do you have any experience with this product? If you have hands-on experience with an Aruba deployment, I'd love to hear from you. Put that down in the comments below. Tell me how you like the Aruba Instant On solution. Any questions that you have, put those down below. I will try to get those answered. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. My name's Chris with Crosstalk Solutions, and thank you so much for watching.